we don't normally watch Collision anymore since Punk is gone and FTR has been neutered. And they had the Battle of the Belts special immediately after Collision. The one match or just the happening that a lot of people were waiting to see was how are the people going to take Chris Jericho? What kind of response is he going to get from the fans? Whatever, is he going to get booed out of the building like he did in New York a few weeks ago? So that was why that I broke my usual, not New Year's resolution, but just standing resolution, and actually watched one of these Battle of the Belt shows, or more specifically, this particular match, which at least I didn't have to wait long. It was on first. They know it from 10 to 11 o'clock. They're battling sleep amongst the viewers, as well as attrition and indifference and malaise. So the way they did this, again, Tony is pulling out all these little tricks to try to artificially inflate the numbers or keep people. You just keep me hanging on. They had 2 hours of Collision, and Collision went 1 or 2 minutes over into the Battle of the Belts time slot, where you see FTR and Danny Garcia standing in the ring. They had just had a 6-man tag with the House of Black. And by the way, Daniel Garcia teaming with FTR. Guess who got beat by the House of Black? Dax. It's like having the Road Warriors teamed with Barry Horowitz and they beat Animal. But nevertheless, that's the first minute of the Battle of the Belts. They're standing in the ring, and then the announcers say the Battle of the Belts is next, even though it's time for the Battle of the Belts. And they say, oh, hold on. Outside in the parking lot, and I swear to God, if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet have not left the ground. They've got Big Bill and Ricky Starks against Jericho and Sammy Guevara scheduled for a street fight for the tag team title. And they go to the parking lot, and they're all four having a sloppy fake fight in front of the TV truck. And then they fade to black for 2 seconds and then come back up to the same thing. There's a fight at the TV truck, and Tony says, we're back on Battle of the Belts. That was the deal. They spent 15 minutes in the parking lot. I'm going to go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that it's gotten to the point. I shouldn't even say it's gotten to the point. It's been at this point for a long time where I don't even know why they keep doing these specials, because there's nothing special about them. I mean, I think it's a great idea. They wanted to have their own Clash of the Champions or Saturday night's main event, whatever you want to call it. But it's such an afterthought, and the weirdness of always having it follow another show. So it doesn't even feel like its own show. It feels like it's a continuation, which it is, of the show you've just been watching. And it's almost like we're all supposed to kind of go along with this mass delusion that we're suddenly watching another show. It's very strange. It's almost like a Monty Python sketch or something.
It's the same announcers in the same place.
Yes.
It's the same shit. But besides that, it's like I've said, having dinner before you have dinner, taking a shower before you take a shower. Here, what you've been watching for the last 2 hours that you're already tired of, here's some more of it. And Jericho, being convinced that he's a master manipulator, he came up with this idea, I'm sure, to mask whatever negative reaction he might have gotten had they, I don't know, tried to have a real match Pinocchio and started from scratch on this thing. He said, we give them the whole thing, and then I go into the arena under cover of such smoke and mirrors that everybody will just be screaming. So that's what they did. And they were next to the truck with garbage can lids and road signs and sawhorses. And there were 8 random people standing around on the street watching and laughing, taking pictures with their phones. And they just kept hitting each other with shit in the same general area. And then Jericho got choke slammed in a mulch bed. And then Sammy ran over both heels with a golf cart and got a 2 count on the sidewalk. And I'm sorry, I'm watching NBC. It's Saturday Night Live. It's a sketch. And so The first 5 minutes, they're in the same 20 square foot area. Then they went around the side of the arena and they're on the street. And Big Bill takes bricks out of a backpack that he hits Sammy with and throws a brick at him, but it goes through the car window. And then they give Big Bill a double vertical suplex on the roof of a fucking Honda Civic or something. And there's poor Rhett Titus. It's my car. And Jericho hits him with a Judas elbow. So they can't even do life or death street fights without comedy. More on this in a moment. They go past the TV truck. They bounce each other off the porta potties. Now they go into the back door of the arena where cameras are waiting to pick them up on the other side. Glad they knew which door they'd come through. And they fought in a laundry cart. And Starks put a fucking toilet plunger on Jericho's face and hit him with a plastic snowman. And I wrote, this is so bad, all because Jericho can't appear in front of people. And then Jericho put Starks' face in a copy machine and made a copy of it and showed it to the camera. So they have to show all of the viewers, what's left of them, how clever they are to come up with these cute spots. And by that time, they were slowing down because this does take effort. And they were hitting each other with plastic shit. And a random production assistant was just standing in the middle of the fight area with her back to the wall. A woman, by the way, not scared, just standing there talking on the fucking walkie-talkie. Yeah, they're fighting here now. And then they went through a break. It was old already. They went through a break. And when they come back, Sammy's doing the fire extinguisher spot, which I love. I've done it throughout the years in various places. Not fucking 6 times a year. And then they were in catering. But the whole backstage area of the arena was completely empty, sort of like the fucking stands. And it was 15 minutes into this, Solomon Grundy, that they finally fought into the arena. And by that point, the baby faces were in control, so the booing of Chris Jericho, if there was any, would be at a minimum. And the people are already wrapped up in whatever the fuck's going on. But by the time they got into the arena, they were all blown up, so it was sloppy staggering and setting up stunts. Brian, you know why this always worked in the territories, the wild, out-of-place fight. Because it was involving... It wasn't just anybody on the card. It was a main event angle with a personal issue between 2 elements, either singles or tags, that had been festering, and maybe there'd been a few matches. And then they have a fucking real match. And then tempers flare, and maybe people are bleeding by the time it's over. And especially if the heels fuck the baby faces and try to run off and get away with it, then the fucking baby faces chase them and they end up in the concession stand or by the locker room or in the parking lot or when there's a fight of a few minutes. And you've started the story on page 1, chapter 1, and then you gradually go to the finish of the story. These morons, because they have no goddamn self-control, no restraint, no understanding of the business, and no context for why anything is done, especially Tony Khan, who attention deficit doesn't do it description, they just start with the goddamn finish and give you 18 minutes of fucking finish. And it's old and it's repetitive and it's silly and it's phony at various times. And it looks like everything else they do. It doesn't register. But they've seen these clips on YouTube of when this was done in the territories and they think this is all it was. It takes you weeks to get to that point of shooting the angle. You have a 15-minute match before the angle starts, and then the angle takes 4 fucking minutes. And you're out, or it gets old and nobody wants to see anymore. How hard is this? So Jericho had Big Bill when suddenly our friend Take a Shit showed up and hit Jericho in the head with a stick, and Big Bill power bombed him off something, threw some tables to the floor. And then Sammy climbed the lighting rig 30 feet in the air or so, does the loopy thing where he tells the fans he's crazy. He needn't really bother at this point. And he took forever to get up there while poor Ricky Starks had to lay motionless like a corpse in a coffin. And then Sammy does the swanton, and Hobbs is there suddenly and pulls Starks out of the way. Weren't they mad at each other a while back, Hobbs and Starks? Nevertheless, rhetorical question. And then Sammy goes through the gimmicked platform and Starks covers him 1, 2, 3. 18 minutes of this. The one thing that they did was cover up. Jericho didn't get booed out of the building like he did in New York City by a much bigger crowd.
Yep, and I was in that crowd.
Everything else, and you were in that crowd. Everything else was fucking abysmal. I don't know. What did you think of it?
Well, it's even worse when you realize, like what you said. I mean, it's apparent that the main reason they did it that way is just to keep him off, away from the live crowd. Otherwise, I don't know how much more of a reason it had to even happen. But it's the kind of thing that we've been seeing them do for a while. Like you said, they get an idea of, hey, this worked in 1982 somewhere. Let's try. And it's like, okay, yeah, great. But you don't know how to execute it. The worst example was, and I'm sure you vented your spleen about this, when they tried to recreate the Tupelo concession stand brawl. And I mean, they even had Jeff Jarrett there, who, you know, Jeff Jarrett, I know he wasn't in that match, obviously, he was a kid, but I mean, he was involved in the company. He may have been present. And to do it that way.
I guarantee you, Jeff wasn't in Tupelo.
Okay, but to do it that.
Not even the guys booked in Tupelo wanted to be in Tupelo, but go ahead.
But the absolute mishandling of that, and I try to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as I can, but the misexecution of that, turning it into this kind of goofy, almost like a parody of the Tupelo concession stand brawl. And that's kind of like what we see whenever they try to do a match like this. It's just, it leans into that whole, you know, what we used to see with the cinematic matches during the pandemic, when with the where they would do all these things that you could never really do in front of a live audience. And it rarely works, very rarely. And this wasn't one of those rare times.
All right, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Tupelo here in a minute. And I've been to that building. I wasn't there the night of the brawl, but I can tell you a little bit about it. But the point with this is that it's incessant. How many more things can they dive off of? How many more things can they fall through? How many more flips can they do, or these stunts with the crash pads and the blah, 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 and get run over by golf carts? It's incessant. It doesn't get over any. It gets over for the people that are sitting in front of it live in the arena. Oh, yeah, they run him over with a golf cart or whatever the fuck. They get a pop, and then 15 minutes later, they don't remember what the fuck because they're popping for some other stunt. It's, again, like watching car crash highlight videos where it's just over and over. What happened to cause that crash? We don't know. We just filmed the fucking cars running into each other. We don't know if it was weather, fucking drunk driver. Who cares what causes something? We just want to see it. And with all the guys hurt like they are, and then to do this, it again, it's counterproductive, and that's why that there is this growing gap. Because the WWE makes investments. Hey, I guarantee you that Endeavor and TKO Holding Group and all, they don't give two shits when they lay down at night whether everybody on the roster is paralyzed and in an iron lung, except that means they've lost an investment. But they are business-minded enough not to allow, much less encourage, the guys on their roster to do this stupid shit, because they know not only does it lead to diminishing returns because people get immune to it if it's not done by somebody you really fucking care about, but also if those people get hurt, They lose money. They got to pay them. They got to treat them with the medical care. They lose the access to that star on their television and on their programs for however long he's hurt. And that means it costs them money. And they don't want that to happen. There's a fine line in this business. You can't just go out there and wrap yourself in bubble wrap and just do headlocks and entertain people. But the whole meaning behind this business before it was taken over by indie outlaw mud show minded morons and then facilitated to a national television level by a goddamn real life Richie Rich collecting breathing action figures. The idea was to get people interested in the personalities and the reason why they're clashing and give them a violent, realistic fight that in the end might hurt, but will not hurt anyone as far as injure them so they can't continue to work. That's the balancing act, the tightrope that is the magic art of pro wrestling. And when you get guys that are just, well, like Darby Allin, he's a great talent that can be produced, but not being produced. He's a fucking moron that doesn't give a fuck whether he breaks his neck or not because he's an adrenaline junkie and he's just thrilled by it. Well, fuck you, you blonde-headed Q-tip looking motherfucker. If I'm paying you $500,000 a year or whatever, you're not going to be jumping your house on a tricycle or climbing Mount Everest. You're going to be taking care of yourself in between the appearances you make for me. And then I'm going to clear these stupid bumps you take so that I know whether it's a risk-reward ratio that we all want to fucking engage in. You goddamn knuckleheads. So they did this, is what they did on the Battle of the Belts. Do you have any further comments about that match before I tell you what else was on the Battle of the Belts?
Well, I mean, it accomplished what they wanted, which I think the main goal was to protect Chris Jericho. I don't know if there was anything else that they were looking to get out of that, but it points to everything that's wrong with what they're doing right now, which is that they are, as you guys have said many times before, but it's very true, they are playing only to the people that are absolutely diehard dedicated to the product and will watch it if there was a test pattern on for 2 hours. They're playing to those people, and they seem to stubbornly have no interest in expanding beyond that. It is mind-boggling.
Well, and I mean, that's been the kind of the mindset since day one. We've talked about it, and they made a brief overture with bringing some more people into the tent when they got Punk. And that's why that Punk was run off, because the indie EVPs and their various ilk know they can't hang in that major league environment. They didn't want anybody showing them up. So the 250,000 people you brought to us, fuck you, Punk, take them back.